Yes. So the first of the two prospect profiles we'll be doing is Helge Grans. Brad, take it away.
Big right-handed shooting offensive defenseman. Were you big on the anti-Tuomisto pick last year? If you are, oh, have I got a second-round target for you? All kidding aside, but not really. Grans is a better skater. Don't love his offensive instincts as much. They're good, not great. But honestly, if you want to kind of get my feel for who Helge Grans is, Tuomisto would be my best comparison from the last draft.
Yeah, I like Helge Grans. Like, he has a good toolkit. Like, he's a big guy, but that doesn't hamper him in how he moves, like you mentioned. I think he has good offensive sense. Like, I think he's a very smart defenseman, which is good. Sometimes you run into offensive defensemen who don't really have a good mind for the game. They just have, I don't want to say that. Like, you have to have some kind of offensive instinct, but they rely on kind of raw tools that don't exactly translate up into the NHL. But with Helge Grans, I do get the impression that he's a pretty smart hockey player. And so that's what makes him attractive to me. I don't think he would be my favorite pick for Detroit at 32 because, like you mentioned, Brad, Tuomisto was picked last year. Not that they're stacked on defense, but wait, which direction does he shoot? I have him listed. I don't have his handedness listed.
Righty.
Yeah. I don't know if he even makes it to pick 32, but I don't know if that's who I want Detroit's pick to be. But I think there's a lot of potential there. You have a big guy who has good offensive abilities playing on the back end, who can skate, is not hampered by the way he moves, and seems to have a lot of room to grow. Like, he seems to be a pretty raw player. That's an attractive pick for a lot of teams, and I think he has a good chance of jumping up into the first round.
He's the type of defenseman I have a hard time seeing him slip to Detroit at 32 just because his raw tools are so intriguing, man. Like, 6 foot, what is he? 6 foot, whatever defenseman that shoot right with great offensive instincts don't come along often.
No,
so that alone
is
rare. Detroit's one of the very few teams where you look at their system and see this plethora of young right-handed defensemen and go, oh, great. We're the exception to that norm. So, and again, he skates well. His defensive game leaves a lot to be desired. But again, most organizations go, but we can fix him. Especially when you see those tools, right? So Grans is intriguing. Love the toolkit. Absolutely love it. Again, people tend to be higher on his offensive IQ than I am. It's good, but not to the levels that everybody else is ranking it at. But yeah, if I'm wrong on that and he's develops a defensive game, like, he's a no doubt first rounder, but because there are questions there, he could go anywhere from, in my mind, 20 to 45.
Yeah, he wouldn't be my first choice as a project defenseman to pull in the first round. There's a couple of guys I would take before him, but I would not scoff at a team taking him in the late teens, early 20s.
That's about right.
Okay. Prospect profile number 2, Jan Mysak, from the Hamilton Bulldogs in the OHL, plays center. Tale as old as time at this point, Brad.
Like him as a winger more than a center. Had an interesting year because he started the year in the top Czech league and then came over to Hamilton halfway through the season. When he got to the OHL, just lit the world on fire. Something like, he was at like a goal per game for like 9 or 10 games in the OHL. It was just absurd. And then he obviously cooled off because nobody keeps up that pace. He's got the tools. Again, he's, I think, just north of 6 feet tall. He's a late birthday, June birthday. So, for those of you that are late birthday truthers, he might have a lot more physical development to go still. So he's a good skater. He gets knocked for his skating because he's got I don't know what to call it, an awkward skating style. But I tend to not hold that against people because I'm in the same boat. Tremendous shot, good hands. He's a goal scorer, man. Like, those types of players don't grow on trees. He knows how to get the puck in the net. And when you're talking about a guy who might not get drafted into the first round, that was a left-hand shot, just an absolute threat around the net. I'm a big fan of if he'd be my pick in all likelihood if he slips to 32, but I'm not betting he does.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you're talking about different kinds of players with Grans and Mysak. Like Grans is big, Mysak small, but at the same time, I see a lot of the same qualities in terms of draft philosophies between the two. Like with Mysak, you're getting a guy who has demonstrated ability offensively, great skating. Obviously, like you said, torched the OHL, is a proven scorer. So he thinks the game in the offensive zone really well. But the thought is, can this guy, like, what's his absolute ceiling? Does he have game breaking skill? Does he have any kind of elite talent? And with his, a concern with, his physicality, or will he be able to cut it in the NHL physically, or would he just get dominated? It's a little bit of a project, but it's a project with a lot of high upside in case it pans out. So same kind of philosophy in my mind. And for the same reason, I do think, Mysak probably will go in the first round. I don't know if he's my favorite pick for Detroit at 32. I've been hot and cold on him. I don't know if, Evan, you have a different read, but I see a guy who succeeded in the system that he was in the OHL, and probably, if he works hard and gets picked by the right team and develops in the right way, can produce at the NHL level. I just don't know if it's like a bona fide top 6 role.
Yeah, I think if he's sitting there at 32, he'd be intriguing enough for the Red Wings to take, and I would be happy with it. It looks like he has a pretty solid 200-foot game already at the OHL level. And he's played in a men's league, so I'm not overly concerned with his potential. I think he could easily be a top 6 forward in the NHL. So if he's sitting in there at 32, I'd be quite happy with that pick.
I don't see him being the go-to guy on a line in the NHL. Not that they're the same player. I see him filling like a Robbie Fabry role.
Man, is he going to love playing with Franz Nielsen?
Oh, hell yeah.
Another fast player that Franz Nielsen can slow down. That's great. And Franz Nielsen will be here long enough to get Myshak's first game as a Red Wing, which will be 10 years from now.
But yeah, if everything goes well for Mysak, I could see him settling in onto a second line role, first or second power play unit. He's good enough he could play on a first power play unit, which is always a possibility, depending what the options are, because he's probably best suited to the bump or left half wall. And obviously the left half wall for Detroit, or the right half wall, I should say, for Detroit for the next 10 years is locked up with Mantha and Zadina. But he's got enough pace and skill in his game. He could play the bumper role. But yeah, he'd be that guy that slots in on the second line. A good complementary player. You get him a centerman who can, drive play, get him the puck, and you tell him to just kind of settle in the goal scoring areas in the offensive zone. And if he puts up like 20 a year, you're happy.
Yeah, definitely. It's same as Grans. Like, doesn't matter how I feel about Grans versus Mysak. I think you're taking almost similar risks with them. So if and when a team does take him in the first round, as I think we all think he's likely to go, at least as of like end of August right now, can't really chide that team for doing it unless there's someone amazing they left on the board. But still, and you know what? A lot of the analytics community is really, really hot on Mysak. Like, a lot of people really do think the world of him and think that his potential could be elite and that he does have way more upside than he's given credit for.
It's that catch-22, because you look at his numbers in Hamilton and in the Czech Pro League this year. He was about 0.3 points per game in the Czech men's league, which isn't ideal. But it's good. It's better than nothing. Let's not forget when we drafted Filip Hronek, he had 4 assists in 40 games in that same league. So, always up for some room for growth. And when he got to the OHL, he started hot, but he finished just over a point per game. And you compare that to the Perfettis and the Byfields and the Rossies of the world who are over 2 points per game. And you go, yeah, he's nowhere in their realm. So I don't know I don't think his upside is elite. I really don't. Because you could say, yeah, the transition to the OHL, of course his production is going to be lower. He's getting used to a new league. Well, most of his production came right when he came over, so I don't think transition was an issue for him at all. But again, that's not necessarily a knock on him. If you're drafting a guy in the late first round, early second round, and he's a he's a second or a third liner that puts up 40-ish points, that's a good pick. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not expecting to get an 80-point player in that range. So, again, you hope you hit the Kucherovs or the Braden Points or the David Pasternak's there, and every once in a while, one of those guys is going to turn out to be that guy. But I don't think Mysak's that guy, but I think he can be a productive NHLer. And it is worth noting, too, that Kucherov and Point get brought up a lot when talking about, you can find these late ones. Braden Point was the top scoring WHL draft eligible player when he got drafted in the third round by like 20 points. To this day, I still have no idea why he went in the third round. In a redraft, not even knowing what he did in the NHL, just with how drafting philosophies have changed, he's a top 15 pick beyond a shadow of a doubt. Same thing with Kucherov. If he wasn't Russian, he's a first round pick, as he torched every international tournament he played. He set scoring records. I think it was at the U18s. Like, these are not guys that came out of nowhere. It was back, not that it was that far back, but it was just teams were hung up on stupid things. That doesn't really happen that much anymore. And there's not players like this in the draft and go, this guy has 100 points in 50 games. Why are we ranking him in the second round? There are no players like that in this draft. So I think we got to keep expectations a little realistic. Maybe we snag a goalie or a defenseman late that exceeds expectations. But as far as forwards go and the projected rankings, none of those guys are sticking out like that. And I don't think Mysak's that guy.
Yeah, then it's the obvious rule here. Like, it's a little bit of a paradox. Oh, any one of those players can turn into the first round guy, like, or the Kucherov, like that fourth round or third round pick could turn into a Kucherov or a Point. So, like, which one do you think is going to be? Who are some candidates for that this year? Well, if we thought they were candidates to turn into Nikita Kucherov or Braden Point, they wouldn't be third or fourth round picks. Plain and simple.
Like, I've got a few guys bumped up on my list where I'll say borderline considerably higher on than the majority. So if you ask me who those guys are, those are the guys I'm going to pick, but I don't have them ranked in the second round. So It's the catch-22. If you're asking me to go through my second round and go, oh, who are you going to? Well, none of them. That's why they're there. Like, if we get a Tyler Bertuzzi out of the second round this year, that's about as good as you can hope for, because what year? 2013 was the year Bertuzzi was picked, right? I'm pretty sure if you go back through that draft, he was the best pick in that round, or damn close to it. So, like, I think people still overestimate how many of these guys come out of every draft. So if you get a usable hockey player in the late first, early second round, you're happy. You are super happy. Like, if Jared McIsaac turns into a number 5 defenseman and plays 17 minutes a night for the Red Wings for the next 10 years, that's a home run pick for where he was drafted. Like, people forget that, and they see those exceptions to the rule and they go, oh, why can't we do that? Yeah, like, so just as an example, I know we're going back 7 years. I just pulled up Tyler Bertuzzi's draft year. So here are the other players that you could consider good NHLers at this point, okay? In the second round that year, JT Compher, Robert Hagg, Tristan Jarry. Oh, I'm so tempted to say Madison Bowie.
I'll drive to your house and punch.
What about Jacob Delarose?
I said good NHL players. Arturi Lehkonen. That's it. That's what came out of the second round in Tyler Bertuzzi's year when he was drafted. Like, these are your odds. And again, that's not even including the late first round where there were superstars such as Morgan Klimchuk and Mike McCarron and Hunter Shinkarik and Emile Poirier. So this is your monthly reminder to keep expectations within reason.
Yeah, I haven't heard Hunter Shinkarik.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.